It's hard to imagine a world without standardization, but there was a time, pre-standardization, where the world was more unsafe. BSI was born in 1901, creating the world's first independent standards body to ensure products and services were safe for their intended use. Today, the roads we drive on, the food we eat, the houses we live in, things we take for granted each day are safe because of standards. But as global challenges have become more complex, from supply chain globalization to digital transformation, from multi-generational workforces to geopolitical impacts, our approach has evolved. Modern risks extend far beyond product safety. We now deliver multifaceted solutions that accelerate progress, reduce environmental impacts, and transform organizational culture and behaviors. We provide comprehensive frameworks embedded into the culture and operations of organizations that help our customers meet global standards, enhance business performance, and achieve organizational goals. As a trusted partner, today BSI collaborates with over 70,000 clients across 195 countries. We ask what you need to achieve, listen to why it matters, and help you create the best path forward. Beyond short-term objectives, we position organizations for sustained, long-term success. Whether implementing new digital platforms like our AI-powered supply chain risk intelligence, unlocking commercial opportunities for social, environmental, and economic sustainability, or measuring impact with real-time monitoring, together with our clients, we build trust in everything we do, every day. From net zero pathways to internal supplier audits, from AI governance to supply chain transparency, BSI transforms standards into solutions that accelerate progress. BSI, delivering impact for a fair society and a sustainable world.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Environmental Management Systems What's New for ISO 14001 2026 edition. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Vanessa McCorkadale. I'm a lead standards development manager for sustainability standards that relate to environmental management. This includes the management of the National Committee responsible for ISO 14001, and all our speakers today have contributed to its development. Next slide, please. So we're going to have a quick look at housekeeping. You'll all be familiar with this from other online events, but so I'll run through it quite quickly. And then I'll run through the agenda for today, and then we'll be on to the main parts of the presentations. So this is a listen-only online event. You might have noticed your microphones and cameras will remain off, or are off and will remain off throughout the session, but you can use the reaction buttons at the bottom left of the screen. You can also zoom into the slide for more detail if there's any elements that look a bit small. There's a button at the top right of the screen which has a question mark on it, and you can ask any questions of us. We do encourage you to do that throughout the presentation as the questions and thoughts come to you, and we'll aim to address all of these at the Q&A part later on. If you do experience any technical issues, please do report them through the same question box. We have a technical team in the background here, and they'll do their best to support you if there are any problems. And then they'll also be monitoring the chat box throughout the event too. At the completion of the event, you'll be asked to complete a feedback survey. We do encourage you to try and feedback and take the time to do that. We really appreciate it so that we can feed those lessons back into other events. And to learn about the upcoming events, you'll see the QR code at the bottom right of the screen. That will take you through, you can see of all the other events that are coming up. In a day or two, you'll also receive a link to the recording so you can revisit any aspects that you missed out. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have a fantastic agenda lined up for today. And as I mentioned, this includes plenty of time for questions and discussions, which we thought would be helpful for you. So first, we're going to hear from Martin Baxter, the Deputy Chief Executive at the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals, or otherwise known as ISEP. Martin's also the chair of the ISO technical committee, or subcommittee, sorry, for the environmental management systems, and that is responsible for the development and maintenance of the family of ISO 14000 standards. We'll then hear from our two keynote speakers, Emma Pye, she's the chair of the National Committee SES 11, and Andrew Marlowe is the lead technical UK expert for the latest revision of ISO 14001. Both have a fantastic CV, being chartered environmentalists, they're fellows of ISEP, they both run successful businesses, Pye Management and One Planet Solutions, and in essence, they help embed sustainability standards into businesses, including 14001 as well as others. And they help to embed them into their processes and practices. So they really are the ideal speakers for you today. We've saved plenty of time for Q&A, as I mentioned. Please pop your questions in throughout. As we draw to a close today, I will also offer a share a discount code for those of you who want to access the standard early. So I'll stop for now, and it's my pleasure to hand over to our next speaker, Martin Baxter. Thanks, Martin.
Great. Well, firstly, thank you, Vanessa, for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. We've got a lot of people who registered, which is fantastic. And we also have people from different parts of the world. So if you're in the very late evening or the incredibly early morning, thank you especially for joining this session. I've been asked to provide a perspective from an environmental lens, just to set the scene before we get into the details with Andrew and Emma on the specific amendments and changes which are coming through into the new updated 14001. Next slide, please. And the next slide again, please. So I thought it's particularly timely actually to just reflect on where we are, not just in the UK, but globally in terms of the state of the environment. And I think that this quote from Sir Bob Watson, when he was the chair of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, really captures it. The health of ecosystems on which we and all other species depend is deteriorating more rapidly than ever. We are eroding the very foundations of our economies, livelihoods, food security, health and quality of life worldwide. It really does capture the significant challenge that we face, particularly given that between now and 2050, it's anticipated another 1.5 billion people will be on the planet. It's also important, I think, because IPBES is meeting in Manchester, opening session today, where on its agenda is the issue of business and biodiversity. It is expected to publish its evidence report on business and biodiversity, including key recommendations for policymakers. That's expected to go under the gavel with a final vote on Sunday evening. And so I think it's a real interesting time when you have both, a serious and significant evidence base coming to the fore from a business and biodiversity perspective, at the same time as the revised 14001, which is obviously a tool to support organisations to navigate their way through both improving environmental performance and enhancing their own organisational resilience to environmental change. Next slide, please. And for those of you who keep up to date on these things, I thought it was just worth kind of reflecting on where things look to be heading. And the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Perception Survey, which was published a couple of weeks ago at Davos, it is really kind of sobering, and this has been the picture for a long time. Whereas short-term risks, so those are 2 years, move up and down in terms of their environment-related aspects, the long-term trend is always that environment features significantly as the top risk. So whether that's extreme weather events, biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, critical change to Earth systems, pollution, etc., they are dominant. And I think the critical importance of environmental management systems is bringing that longer term horizon into day-to-day organizational planning, building an urgency around change and driving improvements forward. So that I think is really important. And it also comes at a time when the UK government published its National Security Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Challenges, which showed incredibly serious security consequences from a combination of extreme weather events driving population migration in different parts of the world, unrest and war between countries potentially, and significant impacts on food production, both driving inflation and driving poverty and poor outcomes for people in terms of their health. So we face a critical time, and that's before we even talk about climate change, which is, you know, typically what people talk about when we start talking about environment. So the challenges are huge, and that's why, next slide please, I think it's really important that ISO has such a set of tools in its armory, because global standards from ISO help to underpin trust in organizational action. It's part of what I call the unseen architecture for global trade, whether it's the way in which we develop products and ensuring that those products can be used in multiple markets. It's around how organizations manage processes and activities, so management systems, for example. It's testing and inspection. So all the technology that we use today is either ISO or IEC kind of relevant. The water that I'm drinking here, kind of hold it up, you know, would have been through a laboratory and a whole set of processes that are underpinned by testing and measurement and inspection, either of laboratories or of the testing standards or the quality standards which are required. So this kind of, the role of ISO in developing and delivering trust in the economy is critical. And there is an incredibly strong focus within ISO on standards relating to sustainability. So whether that's environmental management systems, you know, I have 15 standards in my portfolio as chair of the subcommittee responsible for ISO 14001 and a number of other standards. But also more broadly in the Environmental Management Technical Committee, there are standards relating to climate. We have the UK leading the development of the Global Net Zero Standard. We published just before Christmas the Natural Capital Accounting Standard. And there are also standards around footprinting, labelling, communications, etc. So a really big push from ISO on that. And this importance is that those standards are often recognised by policy and regulators. So we see lots of evidence of ISO 14001, for example, being referred to either in permits or in government guidance or regulation, not just here in the UK, but on a global basis. The whole standards making process or delivery process is underpinned by accredited conformity assessment. So that's an important opportunity as well for organisations to, if they choose, to demonstrate that they have met the requirements that are specified in those standards. And crucially, it's about market recognition. There are millions of users of ISO standards around the world. ISO 14001 is used by 1 million organizations or more. It's used in all countries. It's used in all economic sectors, all size of organization, public sector, private sector. And I think that having that kind of clear framework is really important for both building trust, but also building that recognition as well. And then these last 2 points I think are really important. So the first one is that consensus-driven approach. It does take time to develop international standards, and when Andrew shows you some of the timelines, then there are, you know, it can sometimes be considered by some to be not quick enough or slightly ponderous. Of course, the deliberative process of delivering consensus and having full public disclosure of drafts before they are adopted is absolutely critical to driving not just consensus, but agreement, and in terms of the relevance of those standards and really kind of ensuring their take-up. And then finally on this, you know, I'm really lucky to have 107 participating and observer countries plus other international liaisons in my committee, in the committee responsible for 14001. And that does ensure that we have wide levels of participation from different parts of the world, from the most advanced kind of economies and the least developed economies. And so that is also incredibly important, because if we are developing standards that are used everywhere, then it's important that we have the diversity of views, opinions and contributions to really kind of get the best opportunity for ensuring success. And I should also say that all the work that is done by the standards makers is actually done voluntarily. So the likes of Andrew and Emma on the call and everybody else in my subcommittee who gets involved in developing standards does that out of their kind of desire to set high standards and influence what happens around the world. So good opportunity for me to say a huge thank you to all of those people who do that. And you'll hear from Vanessa at the end about how you, if you choose, could get involved in developing standards as well. So that's enough from me for the moment. I will be chairing the Q&A session. So if you do have any questions as we go through the content, then please put them into the chat, and we will ensure that we get onto as many of those as we possibly can and have a really good discussion. So that's it from me. So I'm going to now hand over to Andrew Marlowe, another ISAB fellow. Over to you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Martin, for giving a high-level overview of ISO and its interaction with sustainability and supporting environmental management. I'm going to take it at a slightly different view from the process that has been the background to the revision. So with the publication of the new edition of ISO 14001 later in mid-April of this year, it's worth trying to understand why it was important to have the revision and how it took shape. So just to support Martin in his role as the chair of the SC1, the subcommittee, within ISO there's various structures to support its committees, and the subcommittee SC1 sits within the technical committee 207, and that's just to say that there are the checks and balances within the ISO process for developing standards. And the subcommittee wanted initially to find out whether to revise the ISO 14000-2015 edition and what changes should it consider. So although, as Martin says, there are many voluntary experts within the subcommittee and within its working groups, it was thought that a survey should be undertaken to get input from existing and potential users, thereby getting the widest possible viewpoint on whether a revision should take place and what areas should be concentrated upon, what areas should be further exemplified to help users better adopt the standard and be able to embed it in their organizations. So maybe if we go on to the next slide. The precursor to the revision process was, as I said, a survey, and the survey findings pointed to two main recommendations: to give greater clarity to the requirements so that they could be easier to understand and use within organizations wanting to implement an environmental management system, and also to provide additional guidance with Annex A within ISO 14001 so that it could help users more fully understand the requirements and their interrelationships and the wider environmental issues. In support of the first finding, survey respondents expressed a view for greater clarity on the requirements related to life cycle perspective, risk and opportunities, and how they relate to significant environmental aspects and impacts, and the control of the organization's operations, including their supply chain and the stages of their product life cycle. These concepts are maybe terms that are not readily used within organisations. So the additional guidance will make it easier to understand both at a senior level, a director level in the organisation, but also those implementing it within the control processes of their organisation. And the second recommendation, where around 50% of the survey respondents indicated an interest in informal guidance on things like climate change, which we hear about a lot in the news and in the media. But how can you better manage your climate change impacts, and how can you manage the impact of climate change on your business? Also looking at materials and the waste management operations, looking at a thing called the circular economy, where resources can be adopted in a circular process to ensure that none of those resources are lost in the management of resources and of waste. And of concepts like chemical management, environmental justice, and the protection of water resources, air quality, and biodiversity. All of these environmental issues can appear daunting at the first time user hearing about them or having to discuss them or embed them in their organisation. So it merited further guidance within the Annex A of ISO 14001, and that will help those users be able to embed those concepts within their organisation. The next slide highlights the working group, which was established to work to deliver the findings of the user survey. So the intention was to make sure that it can deliver on those two requirements, to make the requirements easier to understand and provide support within Annex A, but also with two other aims in mind: to ensure that the revision of ISO 14001 followed the requirements of the harmonised structure, which is ISO speak for the common framework for all management system standards. So if you're familiar with ISO 9001 for quality management and ISO 45001 for health and safety, this harmonised structure is adopted across all of those management system standards, making them more compatible with organisations who use one or more of these ISO standards. The second aim was to avoid introducing new requirements. This second aim was a challenge, as the revision process could introduce the perception of new requirements through the law of unintended consequences. So you should not read this aim as the fact that there are no new requirements, as requirements may be more evident than they were in the 2015 edition, and will depend on your organisation and its environmental management system and the processes that you've adopted up to this point. And just to comment that the photograph on the slide highlights some of the technical experts within the working group and many more online who provide their valuable input into the revision process. My final slide demonstrates the overall timeline of the revision process, which, as you can see, stretched to cover a period of around about 2.5 years, with various checkpoints for internal balloting or voting within the working group and external balloting at each key stage. It is important to note that users had the opportunity to have their say on the revision during the draft international standard DIS ballot, which occurred earlier in 2025, with a wide range of comments and feedback for the working group to review and consider incorporating into the revised standard. As you will see, we are currently in the final draft international standard or FDIS stage, where the final review is undertaken to ensure that no drafting errors, such as spelling or grammatical mistakes, are present. So at this stage, no new requirements can be introduced. So if you have an opportunity to get a copy of the FDIS, you can be assured that it is very close, barring the odd grammatical or spelling mistake, to the final version. So following the FDIS stage, the final edition of ISO 14001-2026 will be published in mid-April of this year. And just a general comment about the level of voluntary input that goes into standards. Overall, I've estimated that many tens of thousands of hours were devoted by the members of the working group to ensure that the revision met its objectives, and more importantly, is a better standard for you to use, either as a new user or as an existing user. And I'm sure that number increases to many hundreds of thousands of hours when you consider all those checks and balances and other international experts who need to review the output of the working group. So this is the basis of the background to the development of the 2026 edition. And I'll hand you over to Emma, as she will cover what has changed within the 2026 edition, giving some examples of the changes and the new issues that have arisen during that revision process. So thank you for your time, and I'll see you later after Emma's presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Afternoon all, hope everyone is well, and thank you again for coming along to today's webinar. So I'm going to go through just some of the changes that have been brought into the new standard, into the 2026 standard. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So this is what we've all been waiting for. So what has actually changed and what's new? So fundamentally, the layout has not changed. As Andrew says, obviously 14,001 needs to still make sure it is in the same framework as 9,001 and 45,001 and the other key documents. So the layout hasn't significantly changed, except there is a slight move of some of the existing 2015 information that has now come under to 6.3. So there is a slight shift. It hasn't disappeared, it's a slight shift, but the layout on the whole has not changed. In regards to the terms and definitions, these are all linking across to the Type A management system standards, terms and definitions. So just bringing that joined up approach again, making sure there is consistency across each of the standards. It was mentioned briefly earlier that Annex A was the area that really needed kind of working on and given a bit more guidance and information around. So what I will say is when you get the new standard, head to Annex A, go and have a look. There's a lot more information there, a lot more guidance that will really help you implement and understand the standard as you work through it. But what I've done today is I've picked out kind of the top 5 changes or new additions. So we're going to go through those over the next few slides. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So most people will be familiar with the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. So this is at the front of the standard, and this has changed now to include those clauses. So it really shows you which part of the clauses of the standard are for which part of that Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. So for those people who are starting implementation, who have never implemented 14,001 before, it really does help guide you through that process of implementation in terms of what to do first, which sections to look at, and what bits need to come as part of your cycle of improvement. So head to the front of the document and you will see that diagram there. Most people will be familiar with it if you've worked with 14,001 before, but you'll just see those slight changes that we've really tried to bring and connect the management system standards into that diagram. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So these are the main changes. So these are the 5 bits that I'm going to go through. So the first one is a revised section, which is leadership. So 5.1. Leadership has always been absolutely vital. And this is, like I say, it's not a new section, it's a revised section. So what has actually changed in this section? So it's really making sure that leadership do exactly that, lead from the top. And these bits of information that are on the slide are taken from the Annex A, from the actual FDIS, and hopefully will be in the final draft. And basically what it means is that we need top management to show leadership and show that trust with their interested parties. So showing that the conversations that have been taking place, the meetings that have been taking place, where they've actually been talking about environmental impacts and environmental performance, their objectives and targets. So actually showing how our leaders showing that leadership from the top. The other part of this, the section of this, the standard for leadership, is basically making sure that top management really do support management roles, and they promote a culture that encourages basically good environmental performance. So what they need to show and demonstrate is that leadership, that cultural change, to show that they are engaging to enhance environmental performance. So how is top management actually engaging with the company to improve on their compliance objectives, their objectives and targets, how they're trying to reduce their impacts? So really actually committing to that. So it was there, but it's really enhanced that section, which is great to see. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So another revised section, environmental aspects and impacts, very much kind of one of the key foundations for the environmental management system. So looking at environmental aspects and impacts, and what it's done is it's taken it a little bit further, taken that next step. So it's now asking to really think about that life cycle perspective. So what does that mean? It basically means looking at the whole of the life cycle, but understanding what bits can you control, what bits can you influence, and making sure you've really considered all of that as part of your environmental aspects. The other part is emergency situations. So this is a little bit new under the environmental aspects and impacts. So we've talked previously about normal and abnormal situations, but now we're talking about emergency situations. So it's really those unplanned, unexpected events, and looking at going, what resources do I need? What do I need to put in place to prevent or mitigate that actually happening, and making sure that's documented a part of your aspects and impacts register, because ultimately that is absolutely key for driving your whole system and pushing that down into your procedures. So making sure you've identified at that high level is absolutely crucial. We can go on to the next slide, please. So this is a brand new section. So this is section 6.1.4, which is risks and opportunities. So this is asking for a documented process. So it needs to be a documented process that needs to be written into your system that identifies your risks and opportunities. And what it does is you need to use your issues, your interested parties, the scope of your EMS to basically identify what those risks and opportunities are, to make sure that you have the assurance that your EMS can meet the outcomes for what it needs to do in terms of environmental performance, your policy and your goals, and also to prevent and reduce any potential for external environmental conditions. So it's looking at making sure that you've identified what those risks are, and again looking at what resources you will need to reduce those risks. So a brand new section for the 2026 standard. And like I say, there's a lot more information in the Annex A around that. So go and have a read of that when you get the new standard. If we can go on to the next section, please. So this is number 4. This is a brand new section again, and this is managing changes to the environmental management system. So what does this mean? So if there is a change to an environmental management system that's been identified, be it from a business change or a change in legislation or from a customer requirement, so what does that mean in terms of change into the EMS? So you ultimately then need to go to your system and you need to do some changes. What this part of the standard is asking for is making sure that you manage that change in a controlled way, and that you have a process for how you manage that change and how you roll that change out. So it has to be a documented process. What we're looking for is information in terms of how you would manage that change, how you'd identify change, manage that change, and how you roll it out. So identifying what resources you need, identifying maybe any training that you might need, or any updates that you need to do your system, and making sure that everybody is aware. So making sure you've got a documented process for that to actually manage that change. If you've got an existing management system and you have got, say, for example, 9001, you might have something similar to this already that you might be able to change and adopt slightly for your environmental management system. So, but people might already have parts of their system already. But it's looking at what you've already got, but making sure you've got that documented process, which is great, because ultimately it's crucial that if you are doing a change in your environmental management system, that you do roll it out and you manage it in the correct way, so everybody is aware of what those changes are. If we can go to the next slide, please. And this is the last significant change that I'm going to go through today, and this is management review. We save the best for last. So not a new section, a revised section, as we know. Management review now has got 3 sections, and it just goes to show how important it is, and that's why they've given it 3 sections. So this is one of my favorite changes, because management review is one of those stages where it really does look and review your system, take on board everything that's changed, look at where your system needs to go, looking at all those changes that are coming along. Is your system robust? And so having a good management review is absolutely crucial. So we've now got these 3 sections. So we've got a management input, so making sure that it's absolutely crucial that now the standard says that top management basically have to be present for their management review. So they are accountable for the environmental management system, that top management review, and that it's carried out. And the management review output, you now need to have a set of documented results. So it was in there previously, but it's making that really concrete now in terms of making sure you've got an input and output, and that your top management are accountable for that environmental management system. So really important, and really glad that all the comments in terms of that section was taken on board. So that's the end of my section, and I'm going to pass back to Andrew, who's going to finish off the changes to the new standard. Thank you.
Okay, Emma, thank you for highlighting the changes that we can expect in the 2026 standard. I thought in this section it may be of interest to the attendees to this webinar to have some suggestions of next steps that they can consider, whether they're a new or potential user of ISO 14001, or wondering how the 2026 version will affect their existing environmental management system. So maybe the first slide will offer 6 suggested steps for new or potential users for them to consider during this webinar and beyond. Firstly, I would suggest that you should consider the benefits that have been outlined in Martin's presentation earlier, in my presentation covering the background to the development of the standard and to the changes that Emma's highlighted in her presentation, so that you can see how these elements fit together to help to reinforce an environmental management system. And that those benefits can include the better management of the impact of your operations on the environment, and even the impact of the environment on your operations, such as climate change and, say, water quality or air quality, depending on the kind of control processes that you have. And also to help managing your environmental compliance with the increasingly complex and increasing number of environmental acts and regulations, to be able to fully understand how you can meet those requirements and how you can identify your status of compliance against those regulatory requirements. And also another benefit is to enhance your reputation within your supply chain, with your customers, with your suppliers to be able to show and demonstrate that your organisation is adopting best practice within its environmental management and is driving towards being a sustainable organisation. Secondly, to purchase the FDIS, the final draft international standard, and review that document so that you can see the full requirements. Emma's highlighted 5 of those requirements that she sees as particularly relevant from the development of the standard, but you might find that there are others that are particularly relevant to your sector and to your organisation. So I suggest that getting hold of that final draft international standard will enable you to fully understand the requirements, but also to be able to look at Annex A, which gives you the benefit from its additional guidance to help you more fully understand what may be required by your organisation. For point 3, you have an excellent opportunity to design your environmental management system with no legacy issues. And as people would say, you're starting with a clean sheet, an opportunity to develop that management system to meet your organisation's requirements and in its role of being an environmental leader in your sector. Point 4 suggests that you consider the processes that you need to put in place to establish the environmental management system in your organisation. And this will be very much tailored to your individual organisation, the personnel that you have and the processes that you operate to deliver your goods and services. But it's important to understand where you want to put the most effort to gain the greatest environmental savings, the opportunity to be able to demonstrate those environmental credentials. And point 5 is suggesting that you look for available resources to help support your ISO 14001 journey. Some of these resources can be free, which is a good opportunity to dip your toe in without incurring excessive expenditure, but others may come at a cost, such as being able to access specific websites and specific resources, or if you need to contract with an external environmental consultant to help you support your ISO management system. But that's by no means mandatory. You may be able to develop those resources internally, and that is probably a good option because you get better buy-in from the personnel within your own organisation. Maybe stay to the end of this webinar, as Vanessa has already highlighted an important offer to help support your purchase of ISO 14001 with a discount code. And as I understand, she's also going to be signposting to available BSI resources. So that will help you to be able to delve more deeply into the subjects that we've been talking about during this webinar. Finally, point 6, if you're looking for external recognition, then accredited certification is going to be available from UCAS accredited certification bodies and from accredited certification bodies accredited and recognised by as members of the Global Accreditation Corporation Incorporated, which is a new organisation that is intending to provide guidance on the certification of ISO 14001 management systems. Maybe if we go to the next slide. For existing users, the suggestions are very similar. The opportunity is to purchase the final draft international standard and review its requirements. As I understand it, and Vanessa will clarify later on, if you purchase the FDIS now, you will get a copy of the final published standard at no extra cost. So if you want to take advantage of that, you can have the opportunity to have an early review of the requirements of the 2026 edition and be able to see how that fits with your existing management system. And point 2 is saying that you can have that early opportunity to revise your environmental management system. And for existing users, it's important to undertake a gap analysis between your current environmental management system and the requirements of the 2026 standard, so that you can see if there are any gaps or where the requirements are partially met or not met, and so that you have an opportunity to be able to update your environmental management system in a targeted approach. And again, consider the processes for revising your environmental management system. Often organisations form small committees to discuss how they're going to look at their processes and be able to make changes to their environmental management system. Other times they look for environmental champions to help drive that process through to its natural conclusion. So you've got an opportunity to use your existing resources and look at your existing processes and see how you can transition them to the new 2026 requirements. And again, there's an opportunity to use available resources. I've already highlighted that during the presentation for new and potential users, but nonetheless, there are resources out there, and whether it's at no cost, low cost, or a higher cost, there are ways that you can seek support to be able to implement your environmental management system. But just to reiterate, one of the topics that Emma highlighted, Annex A provides excellent guidance on the requirements and on the concepts of environmental management. So do please look at that as part of your available resources, because that's there as part of your purchase of ISO 14001. And then finally, just to highlight, if you are currently certified by a UCAS accredited certification body or considering that process, there is a 3-year transition to allow existing users who are certified to be able to transition from the 2015 version to the 2026 edition. So there's a system that enables you to move from the recognition of the 2015 standard to this new standard. So that's another option for you to consider in your journey for meeting the requirements of ISO 14001 2026. That's my suggestions for new and potential users and existing users. I'd look forward to any comments that you might have in the Q&A in a few moments. For me, I thank you for your attention, and I will pass you back to Martin, who is going to be our presenter for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I guess it's probably no surprise, we've got lots of questions. So thank you everybody who's been submitting them. We'll try and get onto as many of those as possible. And I see lots of people clapping their hands. So clearly well done, Emma and Andrew, for all of your contributions. We have had a couple of questions around the availability of the document, both as the FDIS and where people will be able to get a copy. And I think, Vanessa, you're going to put that into the chat later on. So I'm going to leave that hanging for a moment. Oh, you're coming there. Brilliant. So yeah, and I think there'll be a question about if you're already part of British Standards Online and how you do that. So there might be a few technical things there. So that was a question from James that got us going. Right, into next set of questions. So this one I think is probably for you, Andrew. And this is from David, who asks, will the new ISO 14001 remain Annex SL aligned to 9001, 22,000, 22301, 27,001, 45,001, 50,001? I'm glad that David hasn't listed all of the management system standards in ISO portfolio, otherwise he would have run out of kind of room in his question, but you get the picture.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The short answer is yes, but the longer answer is but. The answer is yes, ISO 14001 remains compatible with the Annex SL requirements, which have been fully adopted, with the exception of some clarification for the environmental management issues. So it is compatible with the harmonized structure that is used by other management system standards. The only reason I say but is we are time bound where we are at the moment. So the Annex SL requirements have been adopted within 14,001 2026. And as I understand it, they have also been incorporated into the revision of ISO 9001. But as we go further into the future, Annex SL may be further revised itself. And so 14,001 may be slightly out of alignment with any further revisions in the future. And I can't fully speak to all of the other list of ISO standards that were mentioned there, but as those standards are being revised over the coming years, they will be compatible with the latest version of Annex SL so that they conform to the harmonized structure, and there will be that commonality for users of more than one management system to feel comfortable with the terms and definitions, comfortable with the overall titles and processes that they need to adopt. So yes, it will remain compatible, but just recognize that there is a time-bound nature of the way in which these standards are revised. So there will be some leakage over a period of time.
Thanks, Andrew. And it's probably worth just adding, so I sit on the joint technical coordination group across all of these management system standards. Annex XL provides, if you like, the minimum base on which standards makers can build. So that's the first thing. So there might be additional requirements that are of a slightly general nature that can be incorporated by, for example, 14,001 or 50,001, etc. Secondly, of course, we also have deviations. So we do have the opportunity to make deviations, and we did get consensus for some relatively minor deviations from Annex SL language, and all of the other management system standards also have that. So I would say broadly, well, they're all compatible. I've not yet found an organisation that cannot apply all of the management system standards that it wants to in one system in their organisation. There are occasionally some subtle differences which for technical people can be very perplexing and probably slightly annoying, but nevertheless they're kind of done with good intention. Let's move on to a question from Joanna, or actually a couple of questions. So one was, how does the updated 14,001 align with CSRD requirements, and can 14,001 certified environmental management system be used as supporting evidence for CSRD disclosures? And then the follow-up to that was, does the new 14,001 strengthen alignment with double materiality assessments, particularly around identifying environmental impacts, risks, and opportunities? Do you want to have a go at that one, Andrew, and then I'll come to you, Emma, if that's okay. I'm happy to chip in as well. You're on mute, Andrew.
I was just saying, Martin, if you can just remind me of the first question. I think it was about CSR reporting, but just to capture the full understanding. Thank you.
Yes, so the question was around the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So EU legislation that requires disclosure, and the question was, does the updated 14001 align with CSRD requirements, and can 14001 certified environmental management systems be used as supporting evidence for CSRD disclosures?
Yeah, certainly the framework of ISO 14001 can be used to widely support the level of reporting that is within CSR and other regulatory regimes. The organisation needs to incorporate those within its environmental management system so that it fully embraces those requirements. There are opportunities for the certified environmental management system to be able to be recognised as supporting that process, but there are obviously individual requirements within CSR reporting or regulatory regimes that the organisation will also need to make sure they additionally support it within their management system and beyond, so that they can meet all those requirements. I'm not familiar with some of the intricacies of every one of those schemes, so it's important to make sure that you fully undertake a gap analysis with those requirements to ensure that you're using it to fully report the relevant parameters within the CSR reporting. I don't know if others want to add to that question.
Yeah, I'll just, I mean, clearly the 14001 introduced back in 2015 the requirement to consider changing environmental conditions and their potential to impact on the organisation and the delivery of the organisation's wider objectives. So that context of double materiality was hardwired in, you know, over a decade ago. It's a decade ago, I can't believe that. And that's been continued and maintained. And it's, I think it's important to recognise that that's not just the question of climate-related impacts on an organisation, but it could be around biodiversity loss and affecting, for example, crop yields, or it could be around material availability and resource availability due to kind of other factors as well. So kind of it's quite a broad requirement, but then it gets honed down into CSRD. Right, okay. A question from, we've had a couple of questions actually around management of change. And the questions are around whether or not it is a requirement to have a documented process for management of change, and where that management of change clause comes in. I don't know, Emma, whether you want to pick up on that. I know you covered it in your section.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It is a shall requirement of the standard, and it is something that you are going to have as a documented change, a documented requirement. There was a question around it in terms of what sort of examples might cause a change in an environmental management system. So somebody's mentioned like restructuring is one of those examples. It is. There's other things like if compliance obligations change, so if there's a legal change, that might drive a change in the environmental management system. If there is a change from your interested parties, so all of a sudden clients or customers are asking for something different around environmental performance, environmental impacts, or for you to do some changes within your own processes, that you might be having to reduce your carbon, or you might be having to consider biodiversity and increase biodiversity net gain or something like that. So all of those things might trigger a change in environmental management system. Other things like your interested parties. So if there is a political change, there might be a political change, political driving change, sorry, that might mean that you need to go back and look at your environmental management system, and that might implement something there. Or it might be that you had an incident and you've got some lessons learned from that incident because you've managed to test your system, or you did a practice incident and you had some outputs that ultimately you thought, no, that needs to drive a complete change in how we have set up an environmental management system. So there is a broad, there are probably quite a few there examples, but hopefully that's covered quite a lot of what might be a change. But like I say, if you then have a documented process, you can manage that change in a more controlled way. Hopefully that answers a few of those questions for people.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I mean, I think it is just worth clarifying that, yes, you have to consider any change and the extent to which it might impact on the management system and then deal with that, but it doesn't require you to have a documented process for the management of change. So that's not one of the specified documented processes. It's the extent to which you need that for the effective functioning of your EMS. So it's just worth clarifying that particular point. Let's move on. Solomon has asked, do the changes to management review detailed for 14,001 correspond with the upcoming 9,001 2026? So the organisation has an integrated management review with multiple certified standards. You get the question there, don't you? It's like this comes back to are there slight variations or deviations? I don't know whether Emma or Andrew wants to go with that one. In part, it will depend on your knowledge and understanding of 9001 and where that is. I mean, it's still not complete in terms of its process, so it's maybe a little bit premature to answer that. But Andrew, I don't know whether you've got a view.
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce the close communication that's been between the working group that developed 14,001 and the working group that's developing 9001. So we've had an opportunity to see each other's standards, have some general discussions, and to have presentations on the direction they're going with their standard. Their journey is still continuing, as Martin alluded to there. So I would expect there to be compatibility, and certainly that's one of the aims to try and achieve within the overall process of the revision of these two standards. But there can always be deviations, which Martin also mentioned earlier. So there may be some changes, but I think going back to other discussions about compatibility between 14,001, 2026 and other management system standards, I think they will be broadly compatible enough that it doesn't produce a significant impact on the processes or the way in which you carry out management review. But as always, it's a continuing story, and we'll have to see what comes out of the next iteration of ISO 9001.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's have a question about transition, always an interesting topic area. So Craig has asked, what is the earliest date we can transition to the new standard? Andrew, you've got a background in accredited conformity assessment and accreditation in the dim and distant past, maybe, but do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, I have up-to-date knowledge, and I have tried to find out the latest position. Maybe it's just important just to reflect on some organizational changes that are occurring in and around accreditation. Up until the 1st of January this year, there was an organization called the International Accreditation Forum. And together with the International Laboratory Accreditation Committee, they produced guidance on such things as transition between one standard and a new edition of the same standard. Those organisations have merged together, and on the 1st of January, they formed the Global Accreditation Corporation Incorporated. So all future guidance on things like transition will come from this organisation. Their next General Assembly will take place in April this year, and they will publish more fully and make publicly available the guidance on transition. As I understand, they are looking to have a opportunity for certification bodies to change their processes within the first 6 months of the publication of 14,001. So it would be 14,001 would be published in the middle of April. So in those first 6 months into the autumn, certification bodies will be able to change their processes to fully meet the accreditation requirements to be able to certify to the 2026 edition. Having said that, some certification bodies may consider offering some form of unaccredited certification, but that is not generally available other than as an opportunity to be able to fast track certification at a later date after the 6 months. So I would say take for certified organizations, for organizations looking to certify, they should take the opportunity to acquire the FDIS and take opportunities to arrange their management system to meet their requirements and the requirements of 2026. And by the time you've done that, the accreditation bodies and certification bodies will have the processes there in place to enable the transition from autumn onwards.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And very helpfully, we've had a comment through from Dick Hortensius from the Netherlands, who's in our subcommittee and is also kind of been diligently watching other management system standards as well. And the answer to the question on management review about all of those aspects is that yes, the same changes made in 9001 because it's also in the high-level harmonized structure and hasn't been taken out. So, so yes, so for that question, thank you very much, Dick, much appreciated. So let me pick up some other questions. I've got so many that I'm in danger of just being so there are questions around transition, and it will become clearer. I mean, clearly we're in the FDIS. Typically, you would expect to see any changes in a management system to be operational for at least 3 months. My sense is that whatever happens, there will be somewhere, some organisation somewhere in the world that will want to be the first to get an accredited certificate, the first in their sector, the first in their country, the first in their, this is the race. But typically, I think probably the advice is if you have an accredited certificate at the moment, or you are working towards it, speak to your accredited certification body, and they will advise you when is an appropriate and suitable time, both in terms of your timescales and their timescales, that they will be able to do this hopefully as seamlessly as possible. So let's maybe leave it like that. Let's have a look. What else have we got here? So a question from Alan, I'm just picking these at random now. How would management involvement be audited under the new standard, presumably still through SLT interviews? I mean, I think broadly there's been no, I mean, although there are changes to what management need to consider, actually the process of auditing isn't really changing in standard in that context. So I wouldn't have thought there would be any difference. Emma, I can see people either agreeing with me and shaking their head saying no, that there's no change. So I think I'm kind of there. Emma, you've just come off mute. No.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that there isn't any change, and the standard doesn't contribute to that. So in terms of the approach for the auditor, it will be down to those accreditation bodies in terms of how they approach it. So no change. So it'd be top management interview and documented evidence. So meeting minutes, conversations, emails, all that sort of thing. So no significant change there for that.
Great, thanks. So we've got a question from Dick, and it's, is it now a requirement to explicitly assess under 4.1, not only climate change as per the amendments 1 in 2024, but also pollution levels, biodiversity, availability of natural resources and ecosystem health as potential relevant issues? Dick, I might pick up on that one actually, take kind of chair's prerogative. So what 14,001 talks about is external environmental change, and then examples are provided. And I think what's really important is that 14,001 is an environmental management system. It's not a climate change management system standard, as we know, and therefore in crafting that particular part of the standard, it's very clear that we want to make sure that it's just not having too much focus on, I call it net zero myopia or climate myopia, to the extent that other considerations shouldn't be brought in. So it's, you know, any form of environmental change that might impact your organisation and its ability to fulfil its overall kind of purpose should be considered in the context of that external context. So hopefully that addresses that particular question. So I can remove that one. Right, so a question from David. Do you foresee additional competence requirements to be required in Section 7? So clearly, Section 7 says you need to have competent people and you need to promote awareness to ensure that you can fulfill your management system requirements and achieve your objectives. Do we see any changes or any organisations need to think again around how they assess and evaluate competence in the context of the changes that have been made? I don't know, Emma, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, I mean, the clause hasn't significantly changed. I don't see there being any additional requirements. The level of competence is still going to be the same. I don't see anything additional. The only thing that might change is the fact that because you are identifying probably risks and opportunities and you're looking at those emergency situations from your environmental aspects, then you might have some additional people that might have been identified, which you might not have identified previously, and therefore the competence of those people will need to be assessed as part of that process. But in terms of competency as a whole, no, it might just be that you have additional people because your scope might have just slightly changed because of those slight aspects and impacts. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, and I guess, you know, there are things like subtle wording changes in terms of, for example, outsourced processes now becomes, you know, the purchase of goods and services, etc. So there's kind of slight subtle changes which might then require you to look again at your management system and where things are. And I think it's just, you know, I'm going to make a comment, and it'd be good to get Andrew and Emma your perspectives on this. So my sense is that for many organisations, the changes are going to be quite subtle. If you've got a really good, effective way of managing environment and the interface between your organisation and the environment, and you've been, you know, and you're really driving that, then I don't think that there's going to be a lot of change here that you should either be worried about or that probably you haven't already addressed anyway. There might be some subtle changes. But I do think it's a real opportunity to for organisations and for you who are leading environmental management systems implementation in your organisations to use it as an opportunity to refresh and invigorate your organisation's consideration of environment and some of the wider sustainability issues, and help to drive that transition and galvanise interest both in your top management, but also in kind of that wider workforce. I don't know, Emma, is that something that you see this as an opportunity for helping to kind of move things forward?
Hugely. it's always an opportunity when the new standard comes out. And like you say, this is not the change that we had in 2015, and I can't believe that was 10 years ago either, Martin. It's gone very quickly. This is subtle differences. Yes, there are some new revised standards, revised clauses, sorry, and some new sections. But like Martin said, if you have got a strong environmental management system, which is really integrated and driving your business, that it's not something that just sits there, that is literally opened every day, is used constantly, everybody is aware of it, your top management are talking about environmental matters in every meeting, and they don't just do once a year management review, maybe they do a regular management review, environmental review, and it's a constant topic for conversation, then no, this won't be a huge change. But it is a great opportunity to really go back, do a good gap analysis, see if there are any gaps in your system, and see where you can enhance and improve things, make things more efficient. Like you say, look at the competence of the person, look at your resources, and look to see if that there is a key bit in here, which is making sure that your EMS meets the requirements of your environmental performance. Does it give you that assurance that it does what you've designed it to do? And a good design system should be driving you towards that, all your KPIs and a good environmental performance. So yeah, a great opportunity to just reset, have a look, and have a discussion as part of your management team. It shouldn't be just down to one person. It's everybody's system within a company. Have a chat. Does everybody understand it? And look at where you're going to take the system next. So yeah, great opportunity to do that.
Andrea, I saw you nodding as well. I think you'd be in agreement there.
Yeah, no, I fully concur with Emma's presentation there. I think the emphasis I would place on doing a robust and challenging gap analysis to make sure that the subtleties don't pass you by, that you do fully understand those subtleties, and just to make sure, as Emma was saying, to refresh, as an opportunity to refresh the environmental management system. Sometimes we become accustomed to the things around us and we don't challenge them quite as much as when we've got a sort of stop-go situation where we've got 2015, yeah, we meet that, we have all the audits, we're comfortable, but we should be looking to make sure that there is an opportunity for that gap analysis, just to give us that assurity that we have covered the new requirements. And as Emma also said, maybe there's new people that are embraced in the environmental management system, maybe there's new processes, maybe there's new opportunities to consider some of the environmental impacts that are further described in Annex A of the 2026 edition. So there's a lot there that can help you drive that environmental performance, but I would stress that a gap analysis will be something that you can undertake to give you the confidence that you fully understand how you can meet those requirements of the new edition. Thank you, Mark.
Great, thank you. Matteo has asked a question. I'm going to make this, I'm conscious of time, so we are going to finish on time. So if people have got other meetings and things, don't worry about that. And I know, Vanessa, you've got something that you need to kind of point people in the direction. So I do have that. So you can, yes, you keep an BDI on me, but I just know that's happening. So the point here is from Matteo, is it possible to go into a little bit more deeper on the changes to Annex A? Andrew, I don't know whether you want to add something on that, if that's possible.
I would like to be able to do that, but there are very many changes in Annex A, and we will not have enough time in the remaining part of the webinar to do that. But there are certainly changes there that the working group saw as being an opportunity to highlight issues about meeting the requirements and about the new and developing environmental and sustainability issues that organisations need to consider, including CSR and other issues that have been mentioned during this Q&A section. So I would stress that there's an opportunity there to gain a copy of the FDIS or of the final published standard and see how that works for your organisation. Regretfully, I don't think we have enough time to highlight all of those changes. They're certainly quite extensive changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just worth saying, well, actually, Matthew, a couple of points, I think. So firstly, there's more clarification, and this was something that came out in the user survey, is things like life cycle perspective. So there's more content on that, because there's been a reordering of aspects of the clause 6. Then there's content that supports that as well. So, but I think my broader point is that for every clause that you read in the requirements part of 14,001, stop and go and read the annex. The annex is incredibly useful for giving you that wider context around the very precise wording that is used in some of the requirements, and I think it will give you a lot of context there. So please, everybody, I would really strongly advise read the annex. It always sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? Almost like start at the back and then work forward. I'm left-handed, so that's how I read publications anyway if I'm dealing with it in paper. But yeah, I think have a look at the back and really kind of get a handle on those. I think it will really help you to get those perspectives. So and I've just deleted a question inadvertently. So I think it was from Paul, and the question was around their organisation links their environmental objectives and the supporting 14,001 into their wider ESG policies and requirements. And the question was, is that acceptable? Emma, do you want to go with that one?
Yes, I can. I think the simple answer is yes. 14,001 is a very complementary standard, and is very complementary to the ESG. So yes, is my answer.
Brilliant. Yes, and somebody kindly put that question that I deleted back in. So and it was the same question. I mean, more broadly, I mean, a lot of people don't recognise that 14,001 does require organisations to, kind of in terms of external communication. I think this is really important on that question about corporate sustainability reporting directive. You know, it does have those requirements around external communication, the requirements to ensure the reliability of information that is kind of that you are putting out there, fulfilling your compliance obligations. If you're covered by CSRD, then all of the environmental reporting aspects of that need to be kind of connected into your environmental management system, and you need to assure the reliability of information that it's generated within your EMS into that reporting framework. So there's a lot of really strong hooks and requirements around reporting and disclosure that provide that 14,001 provides that underpinning detailed performance assessment and evaluation that really kind of helps to bring that together. So conscious of time, I'd like to apologize we haven't got onto everybody's question. There are a couple of questions around training, which I think, you know, people will see that there will be courses available where organisations like ISAP or BSI have got training courses, and we will kind of make sure that those reflect the new edition once it is published. We're all very excited. 15th of April is currently the go live date for the publication of the new standard. That will be a big weight off my shoulders. I don't think another one to chalk off. But yeah, a big thank you. So thank you, Andrew and Emma. Really appreciate your insights. And now I'm going to hand over to Vanessa to just provide some closing comments and, importantly, some links for everybody. So thank you.
Hi, thanks so much, Martin. Can I just ask everybody on the call to use your reaction button to join me in thanking Martin, Emma and Andrew for that fantastic Q&A session, but also all their presentations and all the work that's gone into that, as well as time off to join us today. Thank you also to all of you delegates for the questions you've submitted and for joining us today. We do hope that you're leaving today with a better understanding of what the changes are to this new edition of ISO 14001. That's if you're a long-time user or new to this standard. Hopefully you've come away with understanding some of the new concepts as well as practical steps to take into your organizations. If you could move on to the next slide, please. We've created a few slides with resources, additional resources, as Andrew mentioned, some paid, some free, but I hope these will be helpful for you for the next steps. So as a guidance, you see we've joined the webinar today, so that's your first step in understanding the changes, so thank you very much. The next step, as all speakers mentioned, you could choose to buy the final draft international standard, and what that will allow you to do is to then receive the very final published version when it comes out in mid-April, and that will be provided at no extra cost. And there is also that 10% off promotional code there in bold on the right hand side. And you might also want to sign up for some free or paid courses as you're going through the next few months. Next slide, please. And they might help you to understand the benefits of the new standard. So just highlighting this middle one here that I've put a circle around. The reason for that is because it's coming up next week, so it's quite soon. I've put a hyperlink in the title. The slides will be shared, so you'll be able to link to those if you want to sign up for that for the 11th of February. But the button at the bottom right, which says Browse Courses, also takes you to a list of 14,001 courses that you can have a look at. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of other additional resources and also free resources, there's a link there to a free micro-learning. There's a few different management system standards there in the list. So you'll have 14,001 and perhaps others that you might be interested in as well. There's an article that explains a little bit more, and also a changes video or a taster of the changes that was released back in December, which features our own Emma and Andrew in the video. So that might also add a bit of clarity for you. And the link there, I know this came up in the chat, so the link to access and buy the FDIS, if you want to do so from now on, is that bottom fourth link there, and the discount code is there as a reminder. So you can use that discount code right up until the 14th of April. Next slide, please. So in terms of standard development, hopefully you've also had an idea, a bit of a picture of how these standards come about, and you've heard from 3 volunteers as they've all demonstrated the different committees that they're part of and the different expertise. So if you're interested in getting involved in developing standards, I have highlighted that bullet point there that will take you to a web link that describes that a little bit more, and there's also a contact email if you've got any specific questions. Next slide, please. While that's coming up, oh, there it is. We also have, BSI has a young professionals network. So if you are aged between 18 to 35 yourself, or if you know of anyone who is a professional looking to develop their career or build professional connections, most importantly, help shape the world through standards, please click take a photo of the QR code there on the right, and you'll be guided through to join the Young Professionals Network. Again, if you've got any specific questions, my fantastic colleague Sarah Terrell, her email is down there, and she manages the network. Thank you. Next slide, please. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So that just leaves me to thank you. If you wish to thank the speakers again, please use your reaction button. But we're very grateful that you joined us today. It's time to stop now. We've come to the end. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Goodbye.